I want you to picture something. Imagine a dental practice, maybe in Cleveland, Ohio. It's the early 1930s.
Right. And dentistry back then is not what it is today. It's very mechanical. It's all about drilling and filling.
Reactive.
Exactly. And in this office, you've got this guy, Dr. Weston A. Price. And he's not just some local dentist filling cavities. This man is the head of research for what was then the National Dental Association. He is, by all accounts, completely obsessed with data.
He's a true scientist of his era. We're talking hundreds of published papers. He is absolutely at the pinnacle of his field. But he's running into a problem. He's hitting a wall.
He is. He's looking into the mouths of his patients day in and day out, and especially the kids, and he's seeing something that genuinely deeply disturbs him.
And it's not just, oh, you've got a cavity. I mean, yes, they had a ton of those.
So many.
Yeah.
But it was something more fundamental. He saw that their faces, their actual faces were changing. And that's a distinction we really need to lock onto from the very beginning of this, because we tend to think about dental health in a very narrow way. You know, do I have a hole in my tooth?
Yes. Did I floss last night?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Price was looking at architecture. He saw jaws that were getting narrower. He saw teeth that were literally crowding and overlapping because there wasn't enough bone, enough physical space to hold them in a perfect arch. He used this term, facial degeneration.
That's a heavy term. It sounds like something out of science fiction.
It's terrifying. But he was a man of science, and he knew a fundamental biological principle. Form follows function. If the body is building itself incorrectly, if the form is degenerating, it means something is missing from the blueprint. Something is wrong with the materials.
Okay, so he's got a mystery. But here's the problem with trying to solve it in Cleveland, right? If you study sick people to find out why they're sick, you're drowning in variables.
It's an absolute mess. You take a modern American in 1930 or, frankly, in 2024, and you ask why they're sick. Is it the sugar? Is it the white flour? The lack of sunshine? The industrial pollution? The stress of modern life?
It could be anything. It could be everything. You can't isolate the cause.
You can't. It's just noise.
Yeah.
So Price does something completely radical for his time.
Yeah.
Just completely out of the box.
He flips the whole model on its head.
He does. He decides that to understand why we're getting sick, why we're degenerating, he needs to stop studying sick people. He needs to find a control group.
He needs to find healthy people.
Perfectly healthy people. Humans who are, operating at 100% efficiency. People with no cavities, no crowded teeth, and these broad, symmetrical faces he saw in older textbooks, but not in his waiting room.
Which, let's be honest, sounds like a mythical quest. A search for El Dorado, but for teeth.
It really does.
Yeah.
Because even in the 1930s, the modern world with its sugar and its white flour had already touched almost every corner of the globe. To find a true isolated control group, he couldn't just, drive to the next county over.
No, he had to go to the absolute edges of the map.
To the places time forgot.
And that is exactly what we are going to unpack today. This is a deep dive into Price's epic 10-year journey, which he documented in his massive, photo-heavy book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. We've got his field notes, his incredible photographs, and the modern science that in many ways has finally caught up to what he was seeing almost a century ago.
It's a genuine detective story. But instead of a magnifying glass and a pipe, his tools were a dental mirror and a camera. And the first crime scene, or rather the first scene of perfect health he lands on, is a valley in Switzerland.
Let's set the scene there. The Lachental Valley. The notes describe this place as being locked in by 3 snowy mountain ranges. That's very poetic, but what does that mean in practical terms for the people who live there?
It means they were totally, completely isolated. The valley floor is about 1,600 meters above sea level. That's over 5,000 feet up. And in the 1930s, there was no road. There was no tunnel yet.
So how did you get in?
You walked. You hiked up a steep, apparently very treacherous footpath. And in the winter, when the snows came, they were completely cut off. The pass was closed. The rest of the world just ceased to exist for them for months at a time.
Wow. So no supply chains, no trucks bringing in food from the outside, no trade?
Nothing. It was a completely closed loop. A self-sufficient community of about 2,000 souls. And get this. They had no doctor, no dentist, no police force, and no jail.
No jail.
No need for one, apparently. They had to survive and thrive entirely on what they could produce within the stone walls of that valley.
That sounds like a recipe for, well, it could be disaster if a plague hits or something with no doctors. But that's not what Price found, is it?
Not even close. He found what he described as probably the healthiest group of people he had ever laid eyes on. He starts doing what he does best.
Oh.
He starts looking in their mouths.
And remember, he's looking at people who have never, ever seen a toothbrush.
Never used floss. never had a fluoride treatment. The very concept of a dentist was alien to them.
And of course, no one to drill out decay if it started.
Right. And he starts counting. He examines tooth after tooth, and he finds that out of every 1,000 teeth he looked at, only about 3 had any sign of a cavity.
Okay, let's just stop on that for a second. 3 out of 1,000. That's a 0.3% cavity rate.
It's basically zero.
I just looked this up the other day. The CDC says something like 90% of American adults have had at least one cavity. 90% versus 0.3%. That's not a small difference.
It's a different world.
Yeah.
But for Price, the structure was even more impressive than the lack of decay. He noted that every single person he examined had these broad, beautiful dental arches. That perfect U-shape of the jaw was wide enough that every single tooth fit in a perfectly straight line. No exceptions.
Even the wisdom teeth.
Even the wisdom teeth.
I mean, that's the dream. How many of us or our kids have had to get some wisdom teeth yanked out because there's no room at the end?
It's a modern rite of passage. Dental impaction is the norm for us.
Wow.
But in Liechtenstein, the wisdom teeth emerged fully. They were functional. They were just another set of molars doing their job.
And it wasn't just their teeth. He looked at their overall health, too.
Yes, and this part is crucial. He noted they had what appeared to be complete immunity to tuberculosis, TB.
And we need the context there because in the 1930s, TB wasn't some rare disease. It was called the White Plague. It was a leading cause of death across Europe and America. It was ravaging the modernized world.
It was. But here, in this cold, damp valley where people lived in close quarters all winter, nothing. They were immune. He writes about seeing children playing barefoot in streams fed by melting snow, and they were just robust. They had these powerful immune systems. They were, in his words, bulletproof.
Okay, so we've established they're basically superheroes. But even superheroes have to eat. They need fuel. So if they don't have a grocery store and they're stuck on a glacier, what is on the menu?
This is where we get to the core of it. The primitive diet, he called it. And I think the word primitive is a bit misleading because it implies it's crude or simple. But as we're about to see, it was incredibly sophisticated in its nutritional composition.
So what was it?
It really rested on 3 main pillars: rye, dairy, and a little bit of meat.
Rye. So they're eating bread?
Yes, but this is critical. It was whole rye bread, and not the light, fluffy stuff we buy in a plastic bag today. This was a dense, heavy sourdough rye bread. They grew the rye themselves in the short summer season, harvested it, and fermented the dough for a long time.
Okay, sourdough rye. Got it. What about the dairy?
The dairy was the cornerstone of their diet, the absolute foundation. They consumed raw milk right from the cow and enormous amounts of cheese and butter.
But not just any dairy, right? You mentioned the geography matters.
Hugely. This wasn't milk from cows stuck in a feedlot. These were cows grazing on the lush, vibrant green pastures of the high Alps, pastures that were fed by glacial meltwater full of minerals.
Why does that matter for the milk? I mean, grass is grass, isn't it?
Oh, not at all. High-altitude grass, when it's growing rapidly in the intense summer sun, is exceptionally rich in chlorophyll and other special nutrients. When the cows eat that incredibly potent grass, they concentrate those nutrients into their milk and especially into the butterfat.
So the butter is like a super concentrated form of the best grass on Earth.
That's a perfect way to describe it. And we're going to come back to why that specific June butter, as he called it, from the peak growing season was so important. It contained his secret ingredient.
Okay, so rye, super butter, cheese, milk, and meat.
Meat was more occasional. Maybe once a week, sometimes less. Usually mutton or beef. But when they did eat it, they ate the whole animal. The bones went into broth. They ate the organ meats, the fat. Nothing was wasted.
So the most important thing here isn't just what was on the menu, but what was not on the menu.
That's the key. No white flour, no refined sugar, no jams, no jellies, no canned goods, no vegetable oils. None of what Price called the displacing foods of modern commerce. They simply couldn't get up the mountain.
So they were basically accidental health nuts by virtue of being geographically trapped?
They were.
Yeah.
But here is where the story gets really interesting, where it turns from an observation into a true scientific experiment. Because Price didn't just find these perfect people and then leave. He was there right at the moment things began to change.
He found the after picture, too.
He did. This is what scientists dream of, a natural experiment. You see, right around the time he was doing his study, the Swiss government completed a project. They built a tunnel and a railway.
Oh, the drawbridge came down?
The drawbridge came down, and the modern world came flooding in. And with the railway came shops. And in those shops were all the things they'd never had before.
The displacing foods.
Exactly. white flour, which was so much lighter and easier to bake with, sugar, marmalades, jams, vegetable shortenings, canned vegetables, all the conveniences of modern life.
And I assume the people loved it.
Of course they did. Imagine you've only ever eaten dense rye bread your whole life, and suddenly someone hands you a fluffy, sweet white roll with jam. It's a revelation.
It's delicious. It's high energy. It's convenient.
It is, but here's the displacing part. The human stomach only has so much room. So these new foods didn't just get added to their diet. They started to replace the traditional nutrient-dense foods.
So they're eating less of the cheese and rye bread because they're filling up on the sweet stuff.
Precisely. And what happened? Did the health of the adults change immediately?
Well, the cavities must have shown up pretty fast.
Almost instantly. Price went to neighboring towns like St. Moritz, which was already a modernized resort town. It had been connected to the outside world for much longer. And in those populations, the cavity rate wasn't 0.3%. It was closer to 30%.
30. From 0.3 to 30. That is a 100-fold increase.
It's a complete and utter collapse of their dental defenses, a catastrophe. But for Price, the most shocking, the most profound finding wasn't the cavities in the people who changed their diet.
It was what happened to their children.
It was what happened to the children born after the diet changed.
This is the part of the story that, it just completely blows my mind every time I read it. Because we get it, right? Sugar rots your teeth. We understand that. Bacteria eat sugar, produce acid, hole in tooth. Simple.
Right, that's decay.
But Price saw changes in the actual shape of their bodies, the shape of their faces.
Yes. This is the difference he was so careful to make between dental decay, a cavity, and physical degeneration. A failure of the body to build itself correctly.
So what did he see in these kids?
He observed that children born to parents who had adopted the modern diet, well, they developed these narrowed faces. The dental arches, the jawbones themselves, simply didn't grow as wide as their parents' jaws had.
So the teeth come in, and there's literally not enough runway for them to land on.
Exactly. So they come in crooked, they crowd, they twist. Dental arch deformation. And with that narrowing of the jaw came a narrowing of the whole facial structure. He described pinched nostrils.
Pinched nostrils.
Yes, the facial structure sort of collapsed inward. And if your nostrils are pinched, if your nasal cavity is smaller, it's harder to breathe through your nose. This, he theorized, led to a predisposition for mouth breathing.
Okay, I want to push back on this for a second because this flies in the face of everything we're told today. If I go to an orthodontist with my kid and my kid needs braces, the first thing they'll say is, well, it's genetic. You and your wife have small jaws, so your kid has small jaws.
It runs in the family.
Right. Was Price just completely discounting genetics?
Not at all. He understood genetics perfectly well.
Right.
But he viewed genetics as the blueprint, the potential. Think of it this way. You might have the genetic blueprint for a 6-foot-tall, broad-shouldered man. That's your potential.
Okay.
But if, from birth, I feed you a diet that's severely lacking in protein and minerals, you're not going to reach 6 feet. You're not going to be broad-shouldered. The blueprint was perfect, but the construction materials were shoddy.
But wait, we're not talking about starvation here. These people in the modernized Swiss towns were eating plenty of calories. They were eating bread and jam and sugar. They weren't starving.
Plenty of calories, yes, but not plenty of building materials. There's a huge difference. And Price found the absolute smoking gun for this, the evidence that just dismantles the it's all genetics argument.
The sibling comparisons.
The sibling comparisons. This is the most powerful part of his book. He would find a family, right, and he'd photograph the oldest child who was born, say, 5 years before the new road and the new foods arrived.
So raised on the traditional diet.
Raised on the traditional diet. And that kid would have a broad face, a wide smile, perfectly straight teeth, a beautiful expression of their genetic potential. Then he'd photograph the younger brother or sister, born 5 years after the parents had switched to the store-bought white flour, sugar, and canned goods.
Same parents, same DNA.
Identical genetic blueprint, but the younger sibling, narrow face, crowded, crooked teeth, and rampant cavities. The proof was right there in the same family portrait. The blueprint hadn't changed. The construction materials had.
So the younger child's body was trying to build that same broad, beautiful face as their older sibling, but it literally ran out of calcium or phosphorus or something, so it just compromised. It built a smaller, narrower, weaker house.
That's it, exactly. It's a profound thought, isn't it? When we say it runs in the family, maybe what's really running in the family isn't the bad genes for crooked teeth. Maybe it's the bad family recipes.
The bad shopping habits.
We inherit our eating habits just as much, if not more directly, than we inherit our DNA.
Okay, so let's get into those building materials. Let's unpack the secret sauce. Because eat healthy is just too vague. Price was a scientist. He didn't just guess. He took samples of the traditional foods and the modern foods back to his lab in Cleveland for chemical analysis. What did he find? What was the massive gap?
He found a shocking nutrient gap. First, he looked at the water-soluble vitamins and the minerals, things like calcium, phosphorus, magnesium. The traditional diet of the Twist contained about 4 times the amount of these minerals compared to the modern American diet of his day.
4 times the calcium. I mean, that alone is pretty significant. That's a lot more bricks for the construction site.
It is. But that wasn't the big story. Here's the kicker. When he analyzed the fat-soluble vitamins, it contained 10 times the amount.
10 times.
10 times the fat-soluble vitamins, primarily vitamin A and vitamin D.
And these are the vitamins found almost exclusively in animal fats, right? We're talking
Yep.
butter, egg yolks, liver, fish oils.
Correct. The very foods that, modern nutrition has told us to be wary of. But Price found something else in those fats, something that wasn't on any nutritional chart in the 1930s. He couldn't identify it chemically, so he gave it a mysterious name. He called it Activator X.
Activator X. It sounds like something from an X-Men comic. The secret to unlocking mutant powers.
And in a way, it was. It was the secret to unlocking the body's potential. For decades after Price died, it was a total mystery. But modern research has now almost universally identified Activator X as a specific form of vitamin K, vitamin K2.
K2. Okay, so I've heard of vitamin K. Isn't that for blood clotting? That's the shot they give babies right when they're born.
That's vitamin K1. And yes, it's crucial for clotting. K1 comes mainly from green leafy plants, but K2 is a completely different animal.
Okay.
K2 is found in animal fats and fermented foods. And it doesn't have much to do with clotting. Its primary job in the body is to be a traffic cop for calcium.
A traffic cop. I like that analogy. Explain that.
Okay, think of your body as that construction site again. You eat cheese, you drink milk, you get the bricks. That's calcium.
Bricks.
Then you have vitamin D, which you get from the sun or from things like cod liver oil. Vitamin D acts like the workers who unload the truck. It helps you absorb the calcium from your gut into your bloodstream. So now the bricks are on the construction site.
Okay, so I've got my bricks, I've got my workers, I'm ready to build.
Right. But without the architect, the foreman with the blueprint, the workers don't know where to put the bricks. That architect, that is vitamin K2.
Ah, so without K2, what happens to the bricks?
They get dumped everywhere you don't want them. The calcium doesn't get escorted into your bones and your teeth. Instead, it gets deposited in your soft tissues. It builds up in your kidneys, forming kidney stones. Or, and this is the really scary part, it gets deposited in your arteries, forming calcified plaque.
So you're saying I could be chugging milk, taking calcium supplements, thinking I'm doing everything right for my bones, but if I'm deficient in K2, I might actually be calcifying my arteries and giving myself heart disease.
That is precisely the mechanism that modern research is uncovering. Vitamin K2 activates specific proteins. One is called osteocalcin, which literally grabs calcium out of the blood and binds it into the bone matrix. Without K2, that protein remains inactive and the calcium just floats around, causing trouble.
That's terrifying. And Price found that the best source of this Activator X, was in that special butter we talked about earlier.
Yes. The #1 source he found was the butter from cows eating rapidly growing green grass in the spring and summer. Specifically, that deep yellow, almost orange June butter from the high Alps. The rapid growth of the grass produces certain precursors that the cow then converts into K2 in her milk.
It's this perfect chain of nutrition. Sun to grass to cow to butter to human health.
A perfect chain.
But this is where we crash head-on into a massive modern controversy. To get these activators, A, D, and K2, you have to eat animal fat, saturated fat.
You do.
And we have been told for, 50, 60 years to avoid butter, avoid lard, eat low-fat dairy, choose lean meat. But Price's work suggests that saturated fats are not the enemy, they're essential.
His work absolutely screams that. He argued that these fats provide the very structure for our cell membranes. They're critical for immune function. And most importantly, they are the carriers for these life-sustaining, bone-building vitamins. You literally cannot absorb vitamin A from a carrot without eating some fat along with it.
And the outline for this deep dive mentions a paradox about heart disease.
The heart disease paradox, yes. At the time of Price's travels, these populations eating huge amounts of saturated fat. The Swiss with their cheese and butter, the Inuit with their seal blubber. They had virtually zero heart disease. It was almost unheard of.
So how do we square that?
Well, the rise of heart disease in the 20th century correlates almost perfectly, not with eating more butter, but with the replacement of stable, traditional animal fats like butter and lard with new industrial fats, vegetable oils, margarine, hydrogenated shortenings.
So we took the butter out to save our hearts, and instead, heart disease exploded. He would have seen that coming a mile away.
He was convinced we cannot outsmart nature. He believed that when you refine a food, when you remove the fat, you remove the activators, you remove the architect, and the whole system falls apart.
Okay, so we need the fats, we need the architect. But let's circle back to that other pillar of the Swiss diet, the bread. They were eating rye bread every day. But so many people today, maybe even some people listening, are thinking, wait a minute, I thought bread was bad. I thought gluten was the enemy. Aren't grains just inflammatory?
This is one of the most fascinating and nuanced parts of Price's work. He wasn't pro-grain or anti-grain. He was pro-preparation.
The source material uses this phrase I love, be kind to your grains.
That's a great way to put it. You have to understand what a grain is. It's a seed. And a seed's biological imperative is to survive until it's in the right conditions to sprout and grow into a plant.
It doesn't want to be eaten.
It does not want to be eaten. So it protects itself with chemical warfare. It has a whole arsenal of what we call anti-nutrients.
Anti-nutrients, okay, what are they?
The big one is something called phytic acid. It's found in the bran or the hull of all grains, nuts, and seeds.
Phytic acid, what does that do to me?
Phytic acid is a mineral thief. It's what's known as a chelator. In your gut, it literally binds to minerals, calcium, magnesium, iron, zinc, and that forms an insoluble bond. It grabs them and prevents your body from absorbing them.
So if I eat a bowl of, say, raw granola or a piece of quick rise whole wheat bread, I might be looking at the nutrition label and seeing all these minerals, but the phytic acid in the grain is stealing them before they ever get into my bloodstream.
Precisely. You are eating, but you are effectively starving yourself of critical minerals. Now, traditional cultures, like the Swiss and La Chantal, they didn't have chemists, but they knew this instinctively through generations of observation. They knew that if you didn't treat the grain properly, it caused digestive problems and weakness.
So what did they do? How were they kind to their rye?
They used three main techniques: soaking, sprouting, and most importantly, sour leavening. Fermentation. Real, long fermented sourdough. This process is like an external digestive system. It essentially mimics the four stomachs of a cow in a fermentation jar. The wild yeasts and bacteria in the sourdough starter go to work on the dough.
And what do? They
do two amazing things. First, they produce an enzyme called phytase, which neutralizes the phytic acid, unlocking all those minerals. Second, they pre-digest the complex gluten proteins and starches, making them much easier for the human gut to handle. They even increase the B vitamin content.
So the rye bread the Swiss ate was a fundamentally different food chemically than a slice of modern commercial Wonder Bread.
Oh, it's night and day. One is a nutrient delivery system that's been unlocked through biology. The other is a nutrient robber, locked up tight with anti-nutrients.
And speaking of nutrient robbers, this brings us to what might be the most shocking part of the source material, the section on the serial killer. I mean, I grew up on this stuff. My entire childhood was fueled by flakes, puffs, and O's. If it came in a colorful box with a cartoon character, I ate it. But this research suggests that the process used to make these cereals fundamentally alters the food into something toxic.
It does, and the process has a name. It's called extrusion.
Break that down for us. What is actually happening to the grain when it gets extruded?
So you start with a slurry, a sludge of grain and water. You take this mixture and you force it through tiny little holes in a metal plate called a die at incredibly high temperatures and massive amounts of pressure.
And that's what makes the fun shapes, right? The O's, the stars, the puffs.
That's what makes the shapes. You can think of it as high-tech, high-temperature Play-Doh.
Right.
But chemically, what's happening to that grain slurry is incredibly violent. The heat and pressure doesn't just cook the grain, it obliterates the nutrients. The vitamins are destroyed. But far worse is what it does to the proteins. Yes. The sources specifically mention the proteins in corn, which are called zanes. When you subject these long protein chains to that level of heat and pressure stress, they denature. They get twisted and shattered into unnatural shapes that the human enzyme system has never seen before.
So when I eat that corn puff, my body doesn't recognize it as corn protein.
Your body sees it as a foreign, potentially toxic invader. It says, what on earth is this mangled thing? And it can trigger an immune response.
And this leads us to these rat studies. I have to admit, when I first read about this, I thought it had to be an urban legend. but it's cited in the text as some unpublished research from the time.
It's a deeply disturbing set of experiments. As the story goes, researchers at a university took 4 groups of lab rats. Group 1 gets a basic healthy diet, whole wheat, water, vitamins, and minerals.
The control group.
Right, and they lived a normal rat lifespan, about a year. Totally fine. Group 2 was given just white sugar and water, plus the same vitamins.
It's a junk food diet, basically starving them.
Basically.
Hmm.
And they died after about a month. No surprise there. But then there was Group 3. Group 3 was given puffed wheat, the extruded cereal, along with water, and the same vitamin solution.
So they're getting a food product plus vitamins. They should do better than the sugar rats, right?
You would think so. But they died in 2 weeks.
Wait, hang on. The rats eating the fortified breakfast cereal died twice as fast as the rats eating nothing but sugar water.
That's what the research claimed. And it apparently wasn't a peaceful decline. The notes described them as becoming antisocial, biting each other. They developed convulsions and tremors. It suggested that the extruded grain wasn't just empty of nutrition, it was actively neurotoxically poisonous.
There was that other anecdote, too, the one about the box.
Size, yes. The joke, which was supposedly based on a similar experiment, was that they had a group of rats eating cornflakes and another group eating the cardboard box the cornflakes came in. And the rats eating the box outlived the rats eating the cornflakes.
So the box was literally more nutritious.
Or at least less toxic. The thinking was that the cellulose in the cardboard was less harmful to the rat systems than the denatured, shattered proteins in the actual cereal.
That is horrifying, because these cereals are marketed as healthy. They're fortified with 8 essential vitamins and minerals.
They spray a synthetic vitamin coating on at the very end, after the extrusion process has destroyed everything of value. But Price's entire philosophy was that you cannot take a dead, denatured food, spray a few isolated synthetic vitamins on it, and call it nutrition. If the fundamental protein structure is broken, the body rejects it.
Okay, so we've got a diet missing its fat-soluble architects, we've got grains that are robbing us of minerals, and cereals that might be actively toxic. And Price's central thesis is that this combination leads to those physical changes in the face. I want to go back to that, because narrow face might sound like a purely aesthetic concern. But you mentioned breathing. Connect those dots more clearly for us.
This is where Price's work, from the 30s, is having a huge resurgence today in the world of airway health and orthodontics. It's a simple mechanical problem. If a child doesn't get enough of those building materials, the minerals and the activators, during their key growth years, the upper jaw, the maxilla, doesn't grow to its full genetic potential. It doesn't grow wide enough.
Okay, so the upper jaw is underdeveloped.
Right. Now think about the anatomy. The roof of your mouth is also the floor of your nose.
Ooh, right.
So if the roof of your mouth is too narrow and too high arched, which is what happens with underdevelopment, then the space above it, the nasal cavity, is compressed. It's physically smaller.
Which means it's literally harder to get enough air through your nose.
Exactly. The airway is restricted.
Yeah.
So what does a child do instinctively? They open their mouth to breathe. They become a mouth breather. And this kicks off a vicious cycle.
How so?
Well, the tongue is a powerful muscle. It's supposed to rest on the roof of the mouth. When it's there, it exerts a gentle, constant outward pressure, acting like a natural palate expander. It helps guide the jaw to grow wide.
But if your mouth is open all the time...
The tongue drops down to the floor of the mouth to let air pass over it. So you lose that natural expander. The jaw, lacking that internal support, is more likely to collapse inward, making the problem even worse.
And this leads to that look he described. What do they call it? Long face syndrome.
Long face syndrome, yes.
Wow.
A vertically growing face instead of a forward growing one. You see receding chins, gummy smiles, tired-looking eyes with dark circles from poor sleep, and the whole complex of symptoms that starts with that nutritional deficiency.
And this isn't just about how you look as a kid, right? This has implications for adults, for aging.
Oh, absolutely. This is fascinating. Chronic mouth breathing actually accelerates the signs of facial aging. For one, it dries out all the tissues, which can lead to more wrinkles around the lips and chin. But more importantly, proper nasal breathing, with the tongue on the roof of the mouth, acts as an anchor for all your facial muscles. It keeps them toned. When you let your jaw hang open to breathe, those muscles go slack. They start to sag. This can lead to jowls, a receding jawline, and that sort of melting face look much earlier in life.
So you're telling me the secret to a youthful face isn't some expensive cream, it's just shutting your mouth.
Shutting your mouth and eating your butter, apparently. But yes, the functional impact is huge. Mouth breathing is linked to sleep apnea, lower blood oxygenation, and of course more dental decay, because a dry mouth has no saliva to neutralize acid and protect the teeth. It's a complete systemic disaster that begins with nutrition.
We have painted a pretty grim picture of the modern condition here. But Price wasn't just a doomsayer. He didn't just point out all the problems. He left a roadmap. He distilled everything he learned from all these different cultures into what he called his 11 principles of traditional diets.
He did. And what's really remarkable is how consistent these principles were, whether he was studying the Swiss eating cheese, the Inuit eating seal blubber, or Pacific Islanders eating fish and coconuts. The foods were different, but the underlying principles were the same.
So what were the big ones? Give us the highlights.
The first and most important was no refined or denatured foods. That was universal. No white flour, no sugar, no industrial oils.
Okay, number one.
Number two, all traditional cultures consumed some type of animal food. And this is interesting. He actively went looking for a perfectly healthy, long-lived vegan culture. He never found one.
Really? You never found one?
No. Every single healthy group he studied prized animal foods. And this is key. They ate the whole animal. They didn't just eat lean muscle meat like we do. They prized the organs, the bones for broth, and especially the fats.
Because that's where the nutrients are.
That's where the activators are, which leads to principle 3. Their diets were incredibly nutrient-dense. He calculated it was, on average, 4 times the minerals and 10 times the fat-soluble vitamins of the modern American diet. That's the benchmark.
And they prepared their grains and seeds correctly.
Yes, the soaking, sprouting, fermenting. They also ate a portion of their food raw, especially animal products like raw milk, raw fish, raw eggs, to preserve the enzymes. And they had a good balance of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, unlike our modern diet, which is just drowning in inflammatory omega-6 from all the vegetable oils.
One thing in the outline that really stood out to me was his focus on prenatal nutrition. We think about taking a prenatal vitamin once a woman is already pregnant, but Price found these cultures started way, way earlier.
This might be his most profound discovery, the concept of preconceptual nutrition. And it wasn't just for the women, it was for both parents.
For the men, too.
For the men, too. In many of these tribes, there was a specific period of special feeding for young men and women before they were allowed to marry and have children. They were given the most nutrient-dense foods the tribe had to offer.
What kind of foods?
Things like fish eggs, which are loaded with vitamins, the high-vitamin butter from the spring, organ meats like liver. They were intentionally building up the nutrient stores of the parents-to-be.
They were building the baby before the baby was even conceived.
Building a baby is the perfect phrase for it. Price came to believe that the physical health and constitution of a child is determined, in large part, by the nutritional status of both parents at the very moment of conception. If the architect and the bricks are missing for the parents' bodies, the child pays the price for the rest of their life with a narrow face and a weaker constitution.
That's a heavy responsibility. Now, we have to be fair here. We've been talking about Price like he's a prophet, but he's not without his critics, is he?
No, he is not. His work is definitely controversial in some circles. Critics, like Dr. Stephen Barrett of the website Quackwatch, have argued that Price's work is seriously flawed.
What are their main arguments?
They say he romanticized these cultures, that the healthy savage is a myth. They argue he ignored things like high infant mortality and the shorter average life expectancy of some of these groups, which wasn't always due to nutrition, but to, accidents or infections in a world without antibiotics.
That's a fair point. And his methods weren't up to modern standards, right? No double-blind, placebo-controlled trials.
No, of course not. He was a man of the 1930s. He's doing field research. Critics also say he was looking at these cultures through a kind of colonial lens, which is a bias we have to acknowledge.
So how do his supporters respond to that?
They argue that while his methods and his cultural lens were of his time, you simply cannot ignore the photographic evidence. The pictures in his book are the data. They are undeniable. You see the before and after, the perfect teeth and the crowded teeth, right there in the same family. And modern science has come around to validate many of his specific biochemical claims.
Like vitamin K2.
Like the existence and critical importance of vitamin K2, and the dangers of trans fats and sugar. He was decades ahead of his time on those things.
And there's that whole other controversy about root canals, too.
That's a whole other deep dive for another day, but yes, briefly. Price believed in something called the focal infection theory. He did research suggesting that bacteria trapped in dead root canal teeth could release toxins and cause systemic diseases like heart or kidney disease elsewhere in the body.
So he thought they should be extracted.
He did. That theory fell out of favor with mainstream dentistry for decades, but it is seeing a major resurgence in the fields of biological and holistic dentistry today.
Okay, so let's try to land this plane. We've been to the Swiss Alps, we've analyzed the dark chemistry of butter, and we've terrified everyone about their kids' breakfast cereal. Let's make this practical. What do we do? How does someone listening right now apply these primitive principles in 2024 without moving to a remote mountain valley?
I think it boils down to a simple do list and a don't list.
Okay, I like that. Give me the do list first. What should I put in my shopping cart?
Do eat butter, real grass-fed butter, and don't be afraid of the color. The deeper yellow or orange it is, the more of those fat-soluble activators it contains. Do eat organ meats if you can stomach them. Liver is nature's most potent multivitamin.
MFA. I can't do liver.
Then take high-quality cod liver oil. It was a supplement price recommended most often. It gives you that powerful A&D punch. Also on the do list, eat eggs, especially the yolks. Make real bone broths. And if you're going to eat bread, make sure it's genuine, long-fermented sourdough.
Okay, that all seems pretty doable. Now hit me with the don't list. What do I need to get out of my pantry?
Avoid the displacing foods of modern commerce. Get the industrial vegetable oils, the corn, soy, canola, safflower oils out of your kitchen. Replace them with butter, ghee, or olive oil. Avoid white flour and refined sugar as much as possible.
And the cereal.
And please, for the love of your nervous system, reconsider the extruded breakfast cereals. As that grim study suggested, the box might genuinely be better for you.
I don't think I'll ever look at a box of Cheerios the same way again. The box is better is going to stick with me.
It's a powerful image. And finally, on a philosophical level, start thinking about your dental health from the inside out. Brushing and flossing are great, they're important external maintenance, but the real defense of the tooth, the flow of fluid from the inside out that repels decay, is determined by your nutrition. You cannot scrub away a bad diet.
That is such a huge paradigm shift. We treat our teeth like they're inanimate little rocks in our head that we just have to polish, but you're saying they're living organs.
They are living, dynamic organs, they're alive, and they are hungry for nutrients, just like the rest of your body.
This has been an absolutely incredible journey, from a small valley in Switzerland to the very biology of a cornflake. As we wrap up, what is the one single idea you want people to walk away with from all this?
I think it's this simple but profound realization that we cannot outsmart nature. We tried. In the 20th century, we thought our technology, our refining, our extruding, our hydrogenating could improve on traditional foods. And we failed spectacularly. We stripped away the very wisdom, the very nutrients that built strong and resilient human bodies for millennia. To go forward, we actually have to look back.
I love that. To go forward, look back. And I have one last provocative thought to leave everyone with. You mentioned earlier that Price was a man of the 20th century. Do you happen to know what his death certificate listed as a contributing cause of death?
I do. It listed malnutrition.
The man who spent his entire life crisscrossing the globe to study nutrition died of malnutrition.
It's the ultimate tragic irony. Now, he was 77. And some say it was just a side effect of old age and the diseases that came with it. But others see it as a testament to just how difficult it had become, even by the mid-20th century, to find true, nourishing, high-quality food in the modern world, even for the man who knew exactly what he was looking for.
That's a haunting thought to end on. So here is your challenge for this week. As you go about your life, just try one thing. Go find some real yellow grass-fed butter, or maybe just consciously try breathing through your nose for the next hour, or take a hard look at what's in your pantry and ask yourself, is this building me up, or is it just displacing the good stuff?
Stay curious, and remember to feed your inner architect.